Hello and welcome to the latest London South East CEO interview. My name's Ed Bauscher and today we're joined by Alex Nichiporchik. Now Alex is the founder and CEO of tinyBuild, a leading video games developer and publisher. The company is based in Seattle in the US and it listed here in London in March on AIM. And the IPO raised £36 million for the business at a valuation of $340 million. And the share price has done well since then. As I speak, the market cap is now £494 million. So Alex, thanks very much for joining us here on London South East today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ed.
So Alex, can we just start with a brief overview of your tinyBuild business, please?
Sure. So tinyBuild, we're a global developer and publisher of video games with a long-term goal of becoming a media company where our franchise live in media formats that are relevant 10, 20, 30 years from now. That's our overall goal and strategy.
Okay, and why did you decide to list in March? And what are you doing with those proceeds, that £36 million?
Yeah, so we were looking at all options of accelerating growth, and I'm in it for the long run. So listing in London, it was something that we had considered. And then after talking to the investment community, it seems like everyone is very well versed in the type of business that we are, which is mostly a PC and console video game development and publishing business. And we had a very warm welcome and it just made sense for us.
Okay. Now, I know you have a franchise model. Can you take us through how that works and what are the advantages for you at tinyBuild? What makes the approach unique?
Right. So what we do is we find really talented groups of people, independent game developers, and we partner up with them to build something bigger. Because traditionally, over the past decade, the publisher and developer business model, or indie publishing as it's called, has been more transactional, which means that there is a transaction that happens. I'm a publisher, you're a developer, we make a successful game together, and that's great. That creates short-term revenues. However, what also happens during that transaction is a new IP gets created. And if it's financially successful, then it probably has franchising potential. So we really wanted to leverage the fact that within video games, there's so much new IP being created daily that's also successful and finds a target audience and really help bring that to a new level. And for the past 3 years, we've been focused on executing upon that. Right now, we have graphic novels, we have books, we have animated TV shows, and expansions of franchises that really help elevate the brand overall and also de-risk development of video games. So it's a combination of expanding existing franchise and heavily investing into new IP.
But the video games part of it is still the core of the business. That's where most of the revenue is that right?
Yes, short term, we're looking at video games as the profit center because of really great margins, and everything that is non-video games, that's we consider that as really good marketing. It does make revenue, but then in the short term, it's about the exposure, the marketing, the buildup of the franchise, and then in the mid and long term, is going to be about creating more revenue sources for the IP.
Now, I think you're leading property right now is Hello Neighbour. Do you have another title that could match the success of Hello Neighbour in the works?
Well, you know, it's kind of like asking which one of your kids is going to go to college, right? When you have like 24 of them, I guess that's an analogy you can make. But the reality is we're learning from Hello Neighbor and we're applying those learnings to all of our other franchises. And I'm happy to report that our biggest title of last year, called Totally Reliable Delivery Service, we just announced the next game that's in development within that franchise. And the franchise overall has crossed 17 million downloads in just over a year. For comparison, the Hello Neighbor franchise in 4 years has over 60 million downloads.
Okay, and how many games have you got coming up in your release schedule for the next year or two?
Right now, we have 25 games in the pipeline that we're aiming for, release between this and next year. But reality is we're taking a portfolio approach. So we really want to take our time and iterate a lot with every single game and launch it when it's commercially viable, and not because we're locked into a promised release schedule. So we're not going to get into the habit of promising like, a year ahead or something like that on the launch date. We're going to announce launch dates close to launch when the games are essentially ready.
Okay, now you mentioned earlier, you said you're trying to build longer relationships with some of the people you work with. And I think that's the Acquihire model. Is that right? Is that what you call that? Can you explain a bit more about how that works and why you think that's advantageous for your company?
So the Acquihire model is really simple. It's the same as M&A. It's just that instead of acquiring a company, we acquire its assets and put into a new entity. And what that does is it de-risks any kind of potential liability, also keeps all of the structure very cohesive. And it's just, historically, it's been what we have done. We do expect to do more traditional M&A when there are legal entities involved as well. It's just that for these transactions that we've done so far, it made a lot of sense because it's not like we're building something or we're buying something as an exit for the founders. We're actually, joining forces together to build something better, something bigger than the sum of our parts.
And what do you offer those founders? What do you bring to them when you negotiate these Acquihire deals?
So every deal is different. In general, it's a combination of cash and stock incentives, with stock being, my personal preference because I strongly believe in the company. And at the same time, it's all about, the more practical operational aspects, because people join us, and I say join, not that we buy them, because they believe in what we're doing, and what we're doing is trying to build something greater. And in practice, what we do is we bring a lot of production expertise. We have countless examples now where a team might be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people, and a year later there are 10 people. Another year later there are 20 people. So we bring this, help with scaling, because that's the one thing that a lot of developers could use some help with. Is just like, how do you structure your pipeline? How do you structure your production?
Okay. Now, I know a lot of your business is based in developing regions, much of that in Eastern Europe. Well, what are the advantages of working with partners in these areas and having a business in these areas?
So you're right. We are focused on developing and emerging markets. We've been very strong in Eastern Europe. As you can tell by my accent, I'm from Latvia. I speak Russian a little bit. And the whole idea there is there's so much technical talent out there. And at the same time, art and production is also being accelerated in recent years with, essentially the common knowledge sharing that is happening in the industry. And for us, it's a cost advantage, and at the same time, a really good labor pool where there are extremely talented people that we can help reach their potential. That's really what it's all about for us.
And do you think you have an advantage of finding those people in Eastern Europe? You're better at finding those people than some of your rivals in the video games world because you know where to find them. Do you have an advantage there as well?
I feel like it's not difficult to find development studios or things like that. I feel like the biggest challenge is, since the industry is so small, is establishing trust and understanding. Kind of like bridging the cultural and business gap, because business is done very differently in different parts of the world. And I have personally experienced that, having grown up in the post-Soviet state. Then I've lived in Amsterdam. I'm living in the US right now. It's a very different world. And my co-founder comes from the opposite. He's American, and he did a lot of business in Eastern Europe. So it's kind of, a bridging of different types of gaps in business and culture. That is
Okay,
the real challenge.
Okay, very interesting. One last question, Alex. I think video gaming definitely had a boost last year from lockdown as we all had more time on our hands. As lockdown reverses, do you think that trend could go into reverse? Could that be a bit of a problem for your industry?
We've been monitoring this very closely for the past couple of months, monitoring it regionally, seeing if a region goes out of lockdown, if there's any slowdown in sales, and the answer is no. What happened in 2020 is the year accelerated the acceptance of video games. Because once you become a gamer, you didn't know you were a gamer all of your life. And now you will know, and you will continue playing uh, all your life. So it has created a lot more gamers for us.
Yeah, it is kind of an addictive thing, isn't it? Once you get drawn into it, I do understand that point. Well, Alex, thank you very much for joining us today here at London Southeast. Really good to speak to you. We've been listening to Alex Nichiporchik. He's the CEO and founder of tinyBuild. If you want to see more CEO interviews like that, do subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or you can follow us on Twitter at London Southeast. We'll have another CEO interview up very soon, so keep a lookout and do join us for that soon. Thank you very much.